Okay, guys, welcome back to Epic Execution. And today is a really, really different thing. We've got not just one guest, we've got all of us here in the room today, and we're doing something very different. We're going to have a debate. Now, this debate is all about a very important topic for Australian founders is what should they do? Should they stay here? Should they go to the US? And I've got together some amazing contestants against the boys.
Yep.
So you have seen it's a girl v boy. But this is all for the common good. We're really, really wanting to make the most of the opportunity for Australian founders for the next 10 years to really set themselves up for success. So I'm going to hand over to Rushi to explain the rules of engagement, what happens, what the illegal moves are, all of the different things that can happen and we can be undermined with, or we can do the wrong thing. But Rushi's in charge, so handing over to Rushi.
Thank you so much, David. And hello, listeners. Welcome to the podcast. If you're just joining us at this timestamp and you're wondering, well, that does not sound like David. Well, that's good. You're paying attention. I'm Arushi. I'm going to be your host for today. I have taken on the mic and the host hat from David and temporarily his peace of mind. We will find out. Welcome. I am your host. I'm also a type A coffee snob, firstborn brown, first daughter, which is a very lethal combination, as I was telling everyone. I have debated for a few years. And what we have for you today is we are trading away one founder, inspiring stories, and a neat little playbook for 4 incredible founders and a very spicy debate. Do Australian founders need to go to the US to win? Have you been romanticizing the airport lounges and the Silicon Valley hustle and really expensive San Fran rent? Or do Australian companies really need to go expand in the US for, the clout and the capital? We've got 2 teams. So on Team Affirmative, when you've got big names on both sides, you've got to get the notepad out. We've got Maxine Winter, founder, investor, and an absolute startup ecosystem force. And joining her is the brilliant Orshi, founder, community builder, and someone who never shies away from asking a question that most people are trying to avoid. And on Team US, the opposition, we've got David Kenny, founder, investor, advisor, and a man whose podcast is essentially a founder masterclass. And joining him, we've got Jeff McQueen, serial entrepreneur, investor, mentor, and someone who understands that keeping up with the Gen Z slang requires as much resilience as scaling a business. Can we all agree? Wonderful. So what are we doing here today? We've got 2 teams, and before each other starts throwing valuation multiples at each other, let me set the rules straight. We've got 2 teams, the affirmative, that are going for the home ground, and the opposition that are like, we do need the US clout and capital. You've got 4 rounds. We've got 4 minutes for opening by each speaker. We've got 4 minutes to elaborate. And then we take a short break whilst you can figure out all the incredible podcast episodes that you want to put on the next in list whilst they prepare for their rebuttal. We come back and we have 3 minutes for a very spicy rebuttal and 3 minutes for closing. But your job is not done here. At the end of it, I want to hear from you. In the comment section, your unsolicited opinions on who you think has won. Do we really need to go to the US and give up on really good coffee to scale the company? Or do we stay here and work on better execution? I'm going to hand it over to the first speaker from Team Affirmative. Orshi, over to you.
Thank you. Dearest Epic Execution fans, listeners, and esteemed opposition, we are here to argue that Australian founders do not need to go to the US to win. In this debate, a founder is simply someone who starts a business. Going to the US means relocating or spending extended periods of time there. And crucially, when we talk about winning, we mean building a profitable business, of course, while actually having an enjoyable life. As the affirmative, we strongly believe that founders do not need to go to the US to win. Because Australia has all the ingredients to support a founder to build a profitable business and have an enjoyable life. A thriving and growing startup ecosystem, a strong business culture, not just tech, a healthy and beautiful environment that inspires to create, $25 billion in government funds, grants that founders can access, and the opportunity to take risks, because if it all goes to tits, we have a social security system to fall back on. The statement for tech founders specifically used to be true 12 years ago. Before Australia had events, VC funds, incubators, and a thriving ecosystem giving founders access to like-minded peers, investors, and knowledge. Sunrise, West Tech Fest, South Start all started around 2013. Until 2012, we only had 2 VC firms. Blackbird and Airtree started in 2012. Since then, we have 200 of them. Things are only getting better. Australia's Hacker Homes, Araya City, opened 4 homes in just under 6 months and a 200 people waiting list. San Francisco has literally nothing to offer that Sydney doesn't. Since our opposition lives in the past, let's zoom out and look at a bit of history. Back in 2002, when Atlassian started, of course they went to the US. The next generation of businesses like Canva were established in 2013, have dual headquarters. Newer companies, Eucalyptus, Airwallex, Linktree, Immutable, just to name a few, have all grown global companies from our beautiful Australia. Look it up on your Nokia. We're not here to debate what was true for companies who were established in the early and mid-2000s. We're talking about what's true for founders of today, the ones pitching at Blackbird's giants tomorrow. In a world where investors from all over the globe are coming to Australia to have a chance to invest in the country that's number 1 when it comes to capital efficiency. The US is great, but it's not the biggest growth opportunity. It's APAC. APAC's GDP growth is 2 times faster than the US. And Australian tech leaders are in a unique position to benefit from this opportunity because they understand the Western working culture as well as the rest of APAC. So is the US the promised land some capital chasing fresh founders envision? Or is it the faded glory of once thriving San Francisco, now streets full of junkies and broken dreams? Dearest listeners and opposition, there's a reason why Silicon Valley was the only American TV series that did not have a happy ending.
That's amazing.
It is
Oh
amazing.
my goodness. We have some Surrey Hills founders already considering the relocation plans. Over to the first speaker who's fighting for still the US glory. David, over to you.
Oh my God, that was great, Aussie. But let me just put it this way. When you're thinking about winning in building a company, one of the first things you're thinking about is capital. And whilst I 100% agree that with the opposition that capital is becoming more available, we're still a long way to go. And the reality is that money pulls money. Where the capital is in the US. There's 65 times more capital invested every single year in the US than there is in Australia. Now, I get it. It's good. But even if it doubled in value, right, last year that represented $274 billion that US VCs invested in companies in the US, number 1. Number 2, it was $4 billion last year. Yeah, that's great, but that's still a rounding error. So the second thing is about lifestyle. And I knew this would come up, but ask yourself, is there a founder out there that is expecting to have an easy lifestyle? The reality is beaches, all of these things are great. All of the lifestyle, all of the community centres, all the great work that companies like StartMate and all these accelerators, all these new VCs are coming through, that is fantastic for the community, but it's not enough. It's not enough to be in that environment when the environment in the US is so much bigger, so much faster, and so much deeper. So where I asked you to think about this is really to get real and look at, if this is your money, this is your time, this is your opportunity, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the arena where the actual decisions are made, where the actual buying happens, where the actual technology is at its peak? And sure, APAC is growing, but 1 times 1, or even doubling that 1 to 2, is still not enough for what's coming at us with AI, robotics. All of these things are not big enough. So the capital at $274 billion to 4, even if it doubles, and I'm accepting that lots of VCs are coming on board, including some of our learned colleagues here in the room, that's great. But the problem is it runs out. So what happens is you're not in the room where you've got through your Series A, and you may still be able to raise that. But there's not just 65 or 71 that's invested in the US versus Australia. In fact, at Series B, which is really where most of the main value is actually going to be taken and get through that ceiling, that's 100 to 1. There's one check versus 100 checks at Series B that's being made at Series B. So let's talk about exit depth as well. So Google acquiring Wiz in 2025, that was a $32 billion sale. The depth, the opportunities for founders in Australia is nowhere near what it is in the US. That's where the action is. So the market ceiling is also a really important point. I love Australia, and if this was about Australia versus the US, I would not even go in this competition. I love Australia. Everyone in the room loves Australia, and we want to see you succeed. But let's call a spade a spade. This country is basically built on oligopolies. In marketing, the point around groceries, this is controlled by 3 or 4 players. Telcos at 75%, 92%. Airlines 97%. And reality is these are a market. So the depth in the US is so much more. It has so many more opportunities. Australian companies that don't buy fast enough. Their buying cycle is so slow. It takes forever to get a deal. It takes forever to get a proof of concept. They want a free trial, all these things that don't mean they want the edge. And that edge is right in the US, right where that capital is, where that opportunity is. And of course, there's R&D here. Of course, you can have dual opportunities by going in foot in both camps. But at the end of the day, you know which one's right for you.
That was amazing and right on time, David. You made me believe that for the longer buying cycle in Australia and APAC, that I should trade it for the long lines
I think
across the cafes.
I need a Posca after that.
Okay, it's time for the next speaker from Affirmative to elaborate on the points. Maxine, over to you.
Thank you so much for setting us up so well, Aussie and David. Some wonderful points in there, but I think a few clarifications to lean in on. I think, first of all, we anchor back on success isn't capital raising. Capital raising might be a path to success, but the ultimate success is a profitable business. As investors, we are either buying future cash flows directly or we are buying someone else's belief on future cash flows. So we anchor back on where are profitable businesses being built. And actually, too much capital into a business can create a misshapen, wrong-sized business and actually not lead to success, either for the founders or for the investors. And Australia does an excellent job of building profitable businesses. If we look at tech, we produce unicorns 2 times the rate per dollars invested versus the US. We produce 1.2 unicorns per $1 billion invested. And that's not to say the rest of the ecosystem. Let's all remember that venture capital is a tiny part of ultimate businesses, which you deeply know. You have supported these businesses across the capital stack in the Australian ecosystem. The next piece to that is that for those businesses, for the rest of the ecosystem that isn't venture capital, Australia actually produces a wonderfully kind of deep capital pool. Our private equity market is very mature in the Australian ecosystem. And there are lots of founders, whether they're tech founders or non-tech founders, building excellent businesses in the Australian ecosystem. They don't have to go to the US. They can, but it is a far more competitive, far more intense ecosystem where buying businesses, for example, in private equity, you're trading at 7x EBITDA, not 3x EBITDA. So you can trade a much more effective entry price if you're buying businesses, and you can build much more profitable businesses in the Australian ecosystem. And many people do. But if we focus just on the tech ecosystem, we can also produce excellent businesses based in the Australian ecosystem. You can, as you said, go to the US ecosystem, but you don't have to. It is not required to win. For example, we've produced 42 unicorns out of the Australian ecosystem over the last 12 years. Yes, 35 of them are in the US, but a lot of them still have strong headquarters here. And the remaining actually are headquartered here. More interestingly, we've got 7 decacorns. Over 50% of them are based in Australia. And as Aussie mentioned, increasingly they are serving APAC. They are not serving the US. They recognize that there is a regional opportunity as opposed to an international opportunity that they're chasing. You also leaned in on the lifestyle in Australia. Absolutely. It's wonderful. The surf is great. It is very beautiful. And when you are building, all founders that I have ever met are not looking for a lifestyle business necessarily. They are looking for ambition. They're looking for excitement. And if they can focus all of their attention on building, as opposed to making sure that they don't end up homeless, that they don't have to look after their healthcare, that their kids, their family are happy, healthy, safe, they are much more likely to swing for the fences. We see this in secondary dynamics, right? In venture capital, we're often taking a small amount of capital off the table for the founders in those early rounds to look after those base level needs. You don't have to do that in Australia because those base level needs are already looked after via the ecosystem. And so, yes, you don't necessarily have the same extremists, but we think that that leads to better business building. You can take long-term views. You don't have to solve for money off the table today. So we think Australia, you absolutely can build wonderful businesses here, but you don't necessarily have to go to the US to build those excellent businesses.
Amazing. I know.
Well,
All our listeners.
This is what happens when you have a lawyer and a VC. And did you even look at the notes?
Deadly. Oh, deadly.
It is a very deadly combination because we've now thrown some really important social policies against the capital policies and how that impacts our founders in the VC world. The final speaker before we go into the rebuttals and the closing.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay, go for it.
So this has been great. And like any debate, half of the challenge is defining the question, because that's where we get to have the fun creating an argument to win in an otherwise unwinnable space. Mm. And I applaud the other side for their efforts to try and create a space to give themselves a chance in an argument that is in many ways just so one-sided, it's not fair. So well done. A few points, if I may. San Francisco isn't the hellscape it was 3 or 4 years ago. During the pandemic, I was there. I was just back there a couple of weeks ago. It is the most vibrant, dynamic, and successful I've ever seen it. I've been living in the States for 15 years. So those bits of history, if you want to pull it that way, thankfully are in the past. They may come up again in the future. America tends to be a bit like that. But hopefully, for folks that are thinking about it, they're not too worried about the hellscape that things certainly were in the days where it looked like you're on the scene of The Walking Dead. Separately, I think the definition of a successful business and a successful life is a big philosophical one and an appropriate one to debate. But I don't think that's really what we're here for. If the idea was to define a successful business to be a profitable business that you could trade for 7 times EBITDA, then that's great. There's plenty of opportunities in Australia to build something that sells to other Australians and is capital efficient. And that's all well and good, but we're here to talk about founders. This is epic execution, not build a neighborhood consulting practice. Really, let's be real. Like, if this is about epic execution and building a company that defines a market and a category and wins on the world stage and is making it worthwhile of the people listening to this podcast to go around the sun for something like 1/10 of their life at least to make something big, then let's not talk about something little and tiny and focused on just their neighborhood as a profitable EBITDA-focused business. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to create that kind of big company that doesn't have to be big in seats anymore. AI is allowing us to, in my new business, operate 30 times faster in efficiency than my last business. And one thing that Australians do exceptionally well is to be efficient. I love the statistic about, was it 2 to 3 times more unicorns per dollar invested than the US. And I think that's so true. The US has got so much waste and so much performativeness. Aussies just get their heads down and execute. And that's part of the reason why. But let's also be honest. A big part of the reason why our entrepreneurs are good and efficient is the same reason the inland taipan is by far the world's most deadly snake. It's because it's barren here. This market is 1/17 the size of the US. We are far away geographically from everywhere else in the world except for our poor friends in New Zealand. It is tiny. It is far. No one thinks about the Aussie market. Nobody's beating a path to our door. We have to go to their door. So we've got a tiny market full of oligopolies. You know, if you want to do something in fintech, if you don't have the big four on board, bad luck. They're 81% of the market. And do you really think the head of the CBA is waking up today worried about being disrupted No. They've got all the insurance policy they need in Canberra. They'll be fine. They don't need to think about that stuff. Now, the US has got obviously its own banking problems. Anyone who's been around a while remembers 08. But it also has 4,400 chartered banks with FDIC insurance. When you look at the fintechs like Mercury, it turns out their bank that backs them is in the middle of nowhere as a fintech-centric, highly regulated bank. There isn't the equivalent here. And that's just one space. So bottom line is, if you are an Aussie founder who is a bit like the inland taipan, incredibly powerful, incredibly venomous and dominating of your environment because there is so little to eat, this is the way to do it. We can't put our snakes on an airplane. That movie's been made. But you should get out there and win on the world stage because you've got everything that it takes and the rest of your community is frankly depending on you to go home and bring in the bacon.
Amazing. I was waiting for the AI penny to drop and it finally did. And I feel like I can sense the Surrey Hills founders getting their passports out already. Okay, listeners, we're going to give them some time to prepare, but you can start. Listeners, I'm very keen to hear the comments once this episode is live. Which side do you think is winning? Who have good points? Are we staying here on our home ground, drinking a great cup of coffee, surfing on the beach whilst building something really, really valuable without the chaos? Or do we really need to get our passports out, fly away, and build something even bigger with the kind of capital that's available in the US? Whilst we're doing that, I have a very important disclaimer for you. I want you to know that this is a debate. It's an art of persuasion, a compelling story, putting forward a case, which is great because the speakers aren't putting forward their personal or professional views. So don't come after us with any legal cases because we don't have our lawyers on speed dial. Thank you and keep tuning in. Listeners, it's time for the favorite part of the debate, at least for me. It's the rebuttal round. Over to Team Affirmative, Team Home Ground. Go for it with your sassy rebuttals.
Dear opposition team, thank you for casing the point that building a global business requires global expansion. Building from Australia means, yes, going into other countries, but that doesn't mean having to go into the US. You conveniently ignored our point about APAC. US is not the only place. Airwallex, Eucalyptus, didn't go to the US. Would you call them a neighborhood consulting company? I don't think so. Australia, while we're at it, has a huge industry. We've got mining, oil, opportunities for founders to solve for. The opportunity is not building the next Meta, it's automation and AI application for industry, for boring businesses. San Francisco is thriving, according to Jeff, who just decided to move back from there. I rest my case. You're welcome to go and build relationships, spend a week there, meet people, but that doesn't mean that you have to move there. You don't have to relocate there to build a connection. Just how you would be going to Europe and the APAC, Singapore, the rest of the world to expand your global business from Australia. And dear opposition, you genuinely think that it's not important to optimize for profit, to win, and chasing capital is the way to win a business? 75% of VC-backed startups fail. That's a really strong number. Not building for profit is short-term, but eventually all of those businesses are going to have to exit. Maybe there's a reason why San Francisco produces neurotic founders that the entire world hates. Zuckerberg, Bezos, Elon. If the lifestyle doesn't matter, but is that a good life? Is that a winning founder? Have you ever heard anyone saying that Melanie Perkins was evil? I don't think so. So as the affirmative, we strongly believe that whilst expanding into the US is a fantastic growth strategy, it is not necessary for founders to move or relocate to the US to build a profitable business while enjoying their life.
Ooh. The gloves are off.
Love
It's getting very spicy. Okay. Team opposition, Team US. Your rebuttal time starts now.
What a great bunch of points you've made. I love that. But here's what I really want to make everyone in the room think about. Completely agree that capital is not the thing. It gets celebrated too much, and profit of everything is the most important. So let's get straight away off the argument about where the money is and go straight to where the profit is. Has anyone heard of a market and a customer? That's where the profit is. That's where building up your go-to-market motions, getting in the room. How many people choose their life partner, or even one for the next 5 years, on a Zoom call? It doesn't happen. It's not dating. It's where you build trust. It's where you're in the room with people that you say, I'm not going to let you down. This product does this. Let me show you. My people are here. My team are here. All of the right things are here for that success. That's where the market is made. That's where the profit is made. That's how you actually win customers. You don't dial it in. You can't turn up one day and go on for 6 months. You've got to be in there. So if you think about, and I completely agree with you. You cited 2 companies that have sold products and done that exceptionally well. And I'm not saying that this debate is not about, is it possible? This is supposed to be, what is epic? What is the right move for founders? Thinking about, how do they win? What does that mean in terms of giving them the best opportunity? So if I think about the hardship of, it's going to be difficult, founders already know that. Getting on the plane with Australia, the point that Jeff made is that we are more venomous. We aren't drunk on capital. We are efficient. We are people that get on the plane and we hit the whole smorgasbord of talent. We hit the whole smorgasbord of customers. And that's what builds a profit, is sustainable things. So you've got to have margin. You've got to have retention. You've got to have customer satisfaction to make an ongoing and enduring profit. Those things are not dialed in. They are in the market, understanding who's there, understanding the competitors, walking the room, understanding what it takes to win in this market. These are not done on speed dates. So, and I also love the point you made, Maxine, about 37 out of 42 unicorns. That's great. This is why, as Jeff said, we are hunters. We are exceptional. We are great at doing things, but we are putting one hand behind our back, staying here. And if you think Melanie and Cliff went on planes lots, they didn't dial it in. They were in the US there. They're a US company. They're hopefully listing on NASDAQ. They're big bases there. They've got every one of the 42 odd companies are selling something overseas. Now, if you want to think about APAC and think, okay, let's go and sell to China or India, very closed markets. That's a big percentage of APAC. Secondly, are you saying you want us to go to Seoul or to Singapore instead? Mm-hmm. Try selling to customers there. It's a very parochial environment in many places. The US likes Australian founders. They want them to come on the plane. The big VCs say, get on the plane, come over here, base yourself here, reach the customers. We'll introduce you to people. They have reach, they have customers, they have portfolio that help out in that process in the order of magnitude that Australian founders just don't get sitting here in Sydney or in Melbourne or anywhere in Australia. So if we go back to Jeff's point about us being, used to living on scarcity, I want to double down on that, because the reality is that you give Australians a chance in that bigger market and they do good things. And all of the ones that Maxine's pointed out have done good things in that market. And lastly, the government is not, if they want to do someone a favor, why don't you tell the government to go and change the tax rules? When you come back, you bring people back from the US, and someone mentioned AI. AI is ruining jobs. We need to go out, win in that market and come back. And then rather than saying be penalized to come back, get rid of the tax penalty for coming back. And so we've got something that doesn't survive the next 10 years, that survives the next 10 years. Without a universal basic income, Australia's got $1 trillion worth of debt. 20 years ago, it had none. Now, what are we going to do? Where's that money going to come from? It's going to come from winning overseas and letting people come back and win here.
Okay, listeners, if you're feeling opinionated, that's exactly what we wanted. But you've still not made up your mind. We've got some closing arguments for you. We want to hear from you. So as I said, put your thoughts in the comments or start sharing it with your friends and colleagues for the next dinner debate. Our final round, the closing. Who have we got from Team Affirmative?
You made some wonderful points, David, and I totally agree. I think there is lots of opportunity in the US. I live there half time. I would not pretend that there is no opportunity there for the great founders coming out of the Australian ecosystem, but it is not a binary. We don't have to pick just one place to spend 100% of your time. You mentioned there Cliff and Mel spend a lot of time on planes. Yes, they do, and they live here. Their engineering team is here. The reason they do that is because it is far more efficient to run your engineering team and a lot of your team out of Australia. In fact, relative to the US, you spend 25 cents on the dollar to put your engineering team here because of the R&D incentives, plus the currency exchange, plus just the lower wages relative to the Bay Area. But they have built a business for the entire world. Not just the US, they have built a business for APAC, they have built a business for Latin America, they have built a huge business. And this is what Australia does really, really well, and why, as Aussie has lined us up to argue, you don't have to build only in the US. You can build out of Australia for the rest of the world, and you can build excellent businesses. Canva keeps flirting with their IPO because they have an excellent business. The thing is throwing off cash like something that we've never seen, which is very different than the shape of business you build if you build just for the US, just for the US capital markets. If you look at the profitability of those companies going public, it is a very different beast than the profitability of Canva going public. In fact, if you look at the S1 from Uber when they went public, they had to disclose they had no present plans of becoming profitable. They listed as a very well-funded charity. And that is the shape of business that building just for the US creates. So what we suggest is that you can build an excellent business out of Australia. You can spend time in the US. You can spend lots of time in the US, and then you can come back and continue to build for rest of world. Aussie also suggested or shared with you both Airwallex and Uke were built out of Australia for rest of world. Eucalyptus being an incredible success story from the Australian ecosystem, specifically built for rest of world, not for the US. And so the Australian founders, you can build excellent businesses here. You can build them for the domestic market because we have a strong market in many different categories, in the industrials, in healthcare, in fintech, and you can build for rest of world. And that's what the Australian DNA does so well. The in-person piece as well. Relationships are everything in venture and in general businesses. Again, thankfully, we are no longer in-person only as teams. We do hybrid teams internationally. You can build relationships by spending lots of time with folks all over the world, but you don't necessarily have to be around them 24/7. In fact, most founders are so deep hustling, they barely make it out of their office for some weeks at a time. And so what we're suggesting is you can be in Australia for some of your time. You can be anywhere else in the world for some of the time, and you can build businesses that are right sized for those markets. And so we think that to win, you don't have to go to the US. You can build excellent, global, efficient, wonderfully operated, impactful businesses out of the Australian ecosystem.
Amazing.
Very nice.
That's the closing argument from Team Aussie, Team Homegrown, and final closing statements from Team Opposition.
That was great. And I'm so motivated to see another 20, 30, 40 canvas all get created this year. But we all know the truth. This is a numbers game. This is a low probability of being able to create a category that is world-class, even if the talent behind it is absolutely world-class. And the challenge that I think we realistically have to call out for the founders and operators listening to this podcast who want to execute epically is, if you just want to think it's possible and therefore want to back the argument of the affirmative, then you should also go and buy yourself a Powerball lottery ticket, because somebody is going to win that. Somebody is going to win that lottery ticket, and it's going to change their life, usually not for the better, but the odds of that are vanishingly small. And so realistically, if you want to make the limited time you have on this planet working on something you're passionately, professionally engaged in, have the best chances of not failing, then you need to try and put everything you can into the column that helps you to succeed. Because there are so many things. The 75% statistic is not only a true-ish statistic that the failure rate is high. I thought it was higher, frankly. I've always thought it was north of 90% of companies fail or startups fail. So this is already an incredibly irrational thing to be doing. This is already something where you are most likely going to fail. The difference is when you show up in the States in particular, not only do you have language on your side and you have a culture that welcomes you, you also have one big market. You don't draw a little line around half of the planet and declare Asia-Pac is a market. I'm pretty sure the folks in KL think that they're pretty different than the folks in Jakarta, who are very different than the folks in Seoul. It's not a market. It's a geographic blob that helps you to find your country when you're going through a list of whatever, 287 of them on the planet. So realistically, the US is a place that we can go to that is a market, that is a big market, that depending on how you measure it is somewhere between 25% and 30% of the world's GDP, and is also the place where in the technology game, which is most of the audience of this podcast, actually sets the agenda and drives the future from there. So yes, you can, just like you can buy a lottery ticket. And if that's what you want to do, then you should do that. But you probably don't want to be listening to this podcast, because realistically, if you want to give yourself the best chance to crush it for your mission and your purpose and your dream shared by your co-founders, your investors, your early employees, and everyone who comes after that journey, then hiding yourself away in Australia and hoping that you just happen to get that right lottery ticket is a pretty unwise proposition, in my opinion. Thank you.
Amazing. Go team opposition. You almost made me believe that I can give up on good coffee and move and get a one-way ticket to
I do
San
need to.
Fran.
My wife is a big coffee snob. I will have you know.
Are we going to exchange good coffee spots in San Fran after this?
There are fantastic coffee places in San Francisco. The problem is everybody thinks that it's Starbucks, which is terrible.
Maybe that's our next debate.
Go get yourself some Blue Bottle, or even better, find the guys at Bluestone Lane, one of the more successful consumer startups in the US.
Love that. There you
Aussie
go.
Guys
That's a
who
shout
gone
out.
to US and started a coffee chain.
It could
Is
be
that
the Bluestone guys, yeah. Bluestone
the-
Lane, fantastic business, fantastic
Cold
product. By
That's
far
right.
the best. By far the best coffee in San Francisco and New York, for that matter.
Yeah.
Bluestone.
So just
Good shout out.
Good shout out. I love that.
And I'm not even a coffee drinker.
And
I'm just
Posca,
going off
if you don't
everyone I
drink
know who
coffee,
is.
Yeah, get on your
Posca.
Poscas.
There we
Yeah.
go.
This is
We
for
know
the-
how to make a good plug.
This
So-
is for the Warriors.
Love that. Listeners, I hope you're leaving feeling very opinionated, a little bit dangerous for that next dinner debate with your friends or colleagues. We discussed today what it felt like and what it means to grow locally, to scale locally, or maybe get that one-way ticket to San Fran for that market capital, for that clout, for that scale. Either way, the one thing that we got out of today is that annoyingly, sometimes both sides have really good points and both sides are right. So as founders and as listeners, find out what's the best for you. We want to hear your unfiltered opinions. And before we wrap up, a massive shout out and thank you to our founders turned debaters for the day, Maxine, Orshi, Jeff, and David. Thank you so much for your time, for your unfiltered opinions, for that savage rebuttals. And I'm your host, Arushi, and I hope you tune in to the next epic execution idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.